Alexander Blake, a wealthy and arrogant man, chairman of a large corporation, unmarried, agreed to a bet that would change his life in ways he never imagined. He was used to winning, both in business and in life, and he thrived on fierce competition, being extremely cold and somewhat ruthless to those who opposed his interests. At a lavish party in New York, his close friend David issued a challenge that Alexander relished. David, with a smirk and a mischievous glint in his eye, said, "Let's see if you can win, Alexander. I bet you wouldn't dare marry a woman who doesn't fit your normal type." Known for dating extremely beautiful and eligible women, to him, women were just quick flings. Alexander was a little surprised, but with his arrogant nature of wanting to prove himself, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "And what's the prize?" David, grinning and raising his glass of champagne, replied, $1 million to the winner, but you have to marry her and stay married for at least 6 months." Spurred on by the excitement of the challenge and the lure of the prize, Alexander agreed without a second thought. The woman David had in mind was Emma Bennett, a woman who defied Alexander's conventional standards of beauty. Emma was a short, curvaceous woman, unlike any other woman he had ever dated. Alexander didn't know her, but to him she was just another business deal to be won over. A few days later, Alexander received more details about Emma. She was confident, independent, and strong-willed, unlike any woman he had ever dated. This intrigued him even more. He was used to being in control, and he wondered how he would handle someone who might not succumb to his influence. They first met at a fancy restaurant. When Emma arrived, Alexander immediately noticed something different about her. She wasn't intimidated by the fancy setting or him. Instead, she looked at him with unwavering confidence. "You must be Alexander Blake," Emma said firmly as she sat down. "And I must be Emma Bennett," Alexander replied, smiling confidently and holding out his hand. Emma hesitated for a moment, then squeezed his hand. "Let's not beat around the bush," Emma began, her tone straightforward. "I know why we're here. I know about the bet, the terms and conditions." Alexander, surprised by her directness, remained calm. "But you agreed to meet," he said, curious as to her reasons. Emma paused before replying, "Let's just say I have my reasons." "I'm not naive, Alexander. 6 months may seem short, but a lot can change in that time. If you think you can manipulate or control me, you're wrong." Alexander smiled. Emma was proving to be a bigger challenge than he had anticipated, which only made her more appealing to him. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. Days passed, and then Alexander continued to think about how to approach his next move. He was used to the romance game, with beautiful girls surrounding him, ready to fall into his arms at any moment. But this time he found himself facing someone who had her own game. Their second meeting took place at a simple coffee shop, far from the glamorous places Alexander liked. Emma had chosen the location, and that Alexander, curious, had agreed. He wanted to understand her and why she had agreed to what seemed like a temporary marriage. When he arrived, Emma was there, sipping tea with a serene smile. She greeted him warmly, friendlier than when they first met, but still with unwavering confidence. "I thought you liked 5-star restaurants," Emma teased as Alexander sat down. "Sometimes it's nice to break the routine," Alexander replied, trying to sound casual, though he felt a little out of place. They exchanged small talk before Emma quickly got to the point. "If we're going to do this, I want to make a few things clear," she said, setting down her teacup. "I don't care about your money or your personal lifestyle. 6 months is 6 months, and I intend to leave this place exactly as I walked in." Alexander studied her, sensing her sincerity. Emma wasn't the type of woman who saw marriage as a ticket to wealth or social status. "So what do you want, Emma?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Freedom," she answered without hesitation. "Even though we're entering this arrangement, I'm not going to let you control me. You have your own life, and that won't change because of a temporary marriage." Alexander smiled. It wasn't the answer he'd expected, but he didn't mind giving Emma this freedom. For him, marriage was just a formality to win the bet. If she wanted to maintain her independence, he wouldn't mind. "Okay," Alexander agreed. 6 months, then we'll split up." Emma looked at him for a moment, as if to make sure he was really on board with the terms. She had come to this challenge with a plan and a determination to make things work the way she envisioned. Deep down, she knew that Alexander might try to manipulate the situation, but she also trusted in her own strength to resist his influence. The meeting ended peacefully, with both parties clearly understanding their roles. Emma would maintain her independence, and Alexander would ensure that the marriage was just a formality. But as the days passed and the wedding day approached, Alexander began to sense that perhaps the game wasn't as simple as he thought. The wedding itself was cold and informal, more like a business deal than a celebration. Alexander Blake, with his strategic mind, believed he had the advantage, armed with his wealth and power. But from the moment Emma stepped into his penthouse, she made it clear that she wasn't going to back down. Her demeanor remained aloof, and the look she gave him was more of a challenge than admiration. 6 months, Alexander, not another day, she declared firmly as she walked toward one of the large windows, unimpressed by the opulence around her. Alexander smiled confidently, used to initially facing resistance. He was used to the game of power and control. As Emma remained steadfast in her stance, Alexander began manipulating schedules and arranging situations to keep her waiting and off balance. Emma, however, did not budge. She stood her ground with unwavering determination, becoming an unstoppable force that only fueled Alexander's desire to break her. Their relationship quickly became a minefield. Small provocations were dropped in even the most trivial of conversations, but Emma always found a way to deflect them with sharp words. Alexander found himself increasingly insecure. His ability to see beyond Emma's wealth left him feeling exposed. Instead of retreating, Alexander tightened his grip, plotting to isolate her. He cut off contact with her, closed off career opportunities, and sabotaged important events, all to make her feel dependent on him. Emma refused to be intimidated, however. Each setback only made her more determined. Over time, Alexander began to realize that his interest in Emma extended beyond the bet. He admired her tenacity and felt something he couldn't quite name. Emma was unlike any woman he had ever met. She was emotionally captivating. For the first time, he saw her as more than just a rival or a means to an end. He was truly attracted to her. One evening, after a heated argument, Alexander stood alone in the living room, staring out the glass window at the city lights. The sight that had once brought him comfort now felt empty. His friend David's words echoed in his mind. "You're starting to care about her, aren't you?" Alexander tried to smile in denial, but he couldn't deny the truth. That night, after a few drinks with David, he returned home, determined to remind himself that this was just a contract. But when he entered the penthouse, he found Emma sitting on the couch, reading a book, completely oblivious to his presence. "Can we talk?" Alexander asked, breaking the silence that had become their norm. His frustration grew as he tried to understand her. "I know you have secrets, Emma," he said, his voice strained. "But what bothers me is that the more I try to understand you, the more I realize I can't control it, the more I hate it," he suddenly declared, standing up, unable to sit still, completely unlike his usual self, as if the weight of the revelation was too much to bear. Chloe remained calm, watching his every move. She stood up slowly and walked toward him, stopping just inches away. Alexander felt his heart pounding. "Alexander," she began, her voice low and gentle, "this isn't about control." The thought that she could affect him so deeply frightened him. 6 months of marriage were coming to an end. But for Alexander Blake, each day seemed endless. Sleep was elusive, and the feeling of revelation gnawed at him, making his stomach churn. Chloe had become a mystery in his life, not just the woman he'd married after a bet, but the mystery of who he was, the number he desperately wanted to understand. His obsession with discovering the truth about Chloe was overwhelming. "This isn't a game anymore. You have to tell me the truth," Alexander demanded. Chloe sighed, slowly rising from her chair to face him. Her eyes, usually calm and calculating, now flashed with an emotion he couldn't identify, something dark, fierce, and alien. "The truth, Alexander," she said with a bitter smile, crossing her arms. "Do you really want the truth?" He nodded without hesitation, though the tension in the room was growing with each passing second. Alexander braced himself for any answer, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. "Everything," Chloe said, her voice breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. "It led to his death. My father killed himself for your empire. You succeeded at all costs." Her words were like a punch to Alexander's heart. He stood still as fragmented memories slowly emerged. He recalled countless deals, contracts signed, lives crushed by his desire to win. The faces of the people he had hurt blurred, lost among the countless companies he had trampled to reach the top. He had always believed he was in control, always winning. But now the tables were turned. He was the target, and Chloe was the one in control. "Chloe," Alexander managed, his voice weak and shaky. I didn't know. I didn't know you were—" "No, Alexander," Chloe interrupted, stepping closer until they were face to face. "You never knew because you never cared. You ruined someone else's life without a second thought. And now I'm here, not to ruin you, but to make sure you never forget." She didn't give him a chance to process her words. After telling him the devastating truth about her father's suicide and the collapse of her family, she turned and walked away, leaving Alexander alone in the room. The air in the penthouse was stifling, heavy with the crushing weight of guilt. Alexander stood still, everything around him crumbling before his eyes, his usual arrogance gone, replaced by guilt, loss. He wanted to call her, to apologize, to explain the inexplicable, but no words came. How could he justify such irrevocable cruelty? The pain of being ignored by Chloe, someone he had begun to see as more than an enemy, was a new and bitter feeling for Alexander. He was used to controlling control, fighting he had won, but now he found himself on the losing side, manipulated, punished with the silence and contempt of someone he didn't want to lose. Every time she left him alone, his feelings of helplessness grew, and this was only the beginning. One day he tried to talk to her again. "Chloe," he said, his voice low and almost pleading, "I know I've done terrible things. I know I've caused you so much pain. But please, can we try to work this out? Can we at least talk?" Chloe slowly closed the book she was reading, still not looking at him. When she finally looked up, her expression was so cold it sent a shiver down his spine. "Talk," she repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Do you think there's anything left to say? You want words, Alexander?" "After all you've done, words don't work," Emma said, her voice devoid of emotion. Alexander felt the weight of the words crushing him. "I was wrong, Emma," he admitted, desperation creeping into his voice. He tried to prove to her that he had changed, that he was a better man now, but each attempt was met with sarcasm or cold indifference. His frustration was palpable, but it only fueled his resolve. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. One evening, after a disastrous meeting at work where an important project was sabotaged, Alexander returned home feeling defeated. As he entered the house, he heard Emma's laughter from another room. Her voice, once a source of comfort, now felt like a dagger. He overhears her conversations and finds her mocking his decisions at work. He realizes something cold. Emma is meticulously tearing down every piece of everything he's built. Her revenge is cold and deliberate. She wants him to suffer slowly, to watch his world crumble bit by bit. Weeks pass, and Emma's contempt shows no signs of fading. Alexander, once confident and self-possessed, now wanders the house a shadow of his former self. He tries desperately to win Emma's forgiveness, but nothing seems to be enough. He can't sleep, haunted by the weight of his mistakes and the near impossibility of redemption. Yet despite his despair, something inside him begins to shift. Alexander understands that words alone will never be enough. Emma needs to see real, tangible change. Instead of constantly apologizing to her, he began to act quietly. One evening, he left a bouquet of flowers on the kitchen table. No note or explanation. It was a simple gesture, but meaningful. When Emma returned from her evening walk, Alexander watched from a distance. Her expression was still unreadable, but he saw her stop, pick up a flower, and smell it. It was a small moment, but to Alexander, it was everything. It gave him a glimmer of hope. The next night, he made her a cup of tea, knowing it was her favorite thing to have before bed. "Hey, I thought you might like something warm," he said softly, making sure not to make his presence known. Emma didn't say anything at first, but she took the tea, still staring at the city skyline. Alexander stood beside her in silence, simply being there, not expecting anything in return. The air between them seemed tense, but for the first time in weeks it wasn't stifling, as if something had changed, even if just a little. Over the next few days, Alexander continued these small acts of kindness. He noticed Emma's barriers starting to crumble, if only a little. She accepted flowers, cups of tea, and even engaged in short, superficial conversations over breakfast. It was a slow process, but progress nonetheless. He began to care about social goals in his work, beyond profits. This was a far cry from his previous business goals, where profits were the top priority and he would do anything to achieve them. Alexander was careful, knowing that he couldn't rush them. Her small signs of recognition were enough to keep him hopeful. They began to share small moments, like cooking breakfast together or discussing trivial topics in the evenings. The ice between them began to melt, and Alexander hoped that one day he might win Emma's complete forgiveness and maybe, just maybe, her love. Something still bothered him. Despite the progress, Alexander sensed that Emma was keeping secrets. Sometimes she remained reserved, avoiding deeper conversations about the past or the future. It was as if she were waiting for the right moment to speak. But finally, with a mixture of pain and determination, she spoke. "You're right, Alexander," Emma said, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. "There's something I thought I couldn't tell you until now. But maybe it's time." Alexander felt the tension in the air around him. Whatever it was, he knew it would change everything. He leaned forward, waiting for the revelation to come, but still dreading what he might hear. "Do you remember the company you destroyed? The company my dad ran?" Emma began. Her voice grew more serious. Alexander's mind was racing. He hadn't just destroyed a company or a family. He'd destroyed a life. "Emma," he tried to say, but his voice broke. I don't know. I could never have imagined." She finally looked at him, and the tears she'd been holding back spilled down her cheeks. Even as her face was etched with pain, there was undeniable strength in her eyes. "No, you don't care," Emma said, her voice full of hurt and resentment. "Because you never cared. You ruined lives, Alexander, and you couldn't even see the destruction you caused." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she admitted honestly. "What you did was devastating." She paused as if carefully considering her next words. "But I see you trying. Maybe someday you can find a way to move forward. But it won't be easy. It won't be quick." Alexander nodded, feeling both hopeful and desperate. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but at least Emma was willing to consider the possibility of a different future. His guilt would be the impetus for change. He wanted not only to win back Emma's love, but to become a man worthy of her respect and the respect of all those he had hurt in his ruthless work. That morning that Alexander had made a decision. He would not just stand there, letting the past condemn him forever. He would start over, and the first step was to repair as much damage as possible. He began tracking down families and small businesses that had been hurt by his company's move, setting up recovery programs to help them rebuild. Emma watched from afar. At first, she was cautious, observing Alexander's behavior. She knew he was trying to change, but forgiveness wouldn't come easily. However, as the days passed and then Alexander showed real change, she began to feel something new, a respect and admiration she hadn't expected. He was changing, and she could see it. The 6-month prenup was up. Alexander offered Emma another chance. Another 6 months. He didn't want to lose Emma. Emma nodded in agreement. Recovery programs began to take effect, and more families began to see a glimmer of hope. Alexander's company began to implement more social service projects his company had never done before. One evening, Emma approached him. "Alexander," she said, her voice even, "I want you to know that I'm ready to try. Maybe it's time for us to let go of the past and build something new." Alexander felt a wave of relief he hadn't realized he'd been waiting for. Those words meant more to him than he could have imagined. Emma was willing to give them a chance, not as a couple forced into a relationship, but as two people willing to start over. Emma and Alexander became closer. Their conversations became less guarded and more sincere. They fell in love and together implemented many social projects for the community. Alexander found life more meaningful than ever, with Emma accompanying him to implement projects that benefit the community. As time passed, they felt they needed each other more than ever. The wound in Emma's heart healed, and they did social work together. Their love blossomed in a deep and real way. "I love you," Emma finally said. Alexander smiled, his heart full. "I love you too." Alexander, Emma said, her voice soft but firm. I want to try. I want to build something with you. But this time, as equals. As a real couple. Those moments were pure happiness for both of them. They have overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable before, and now they are ready to move forward together. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next videos. Comment, "Love is beautiful," if you find the story meaningful.